Maurice Golden, member of the Scottish Parliament, but also the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform. Welcome to Brussels. Why are you here today? What is your message to EU partners and neighbours, and indeed anyone in Brussels that wants to listen to the view from Scotland, the view from the Conservatives in the UK?
I think it's twofold. Firstly, it's that we want to ensure that we have an ongoing relationship, an ongoing dialogue with our European neighbours and friends, no matter what happens with respect to Brexit. And that means ensuring that in all tiers of government that we are continuing to work together, to share best practice and to be part of one large global community. And I think secondly, from my own personal perspective, I think we need to continue working together to progress the environmental agenda, to begin to really tackle climate change. There's some fantastic framework directives, which probably doesn't get said a lot, but there's some great work that's gone on in the European Union around this area, and we need to ensure that pressure is maintained both here in Brussels and throughout each constituent nation state.
And I've got, obviously now turning to this, the subject of Brexit, can't avoid that, the historic vote next week. But you voted yesterday in the Scottish Parliament. 92 MSPs voted to reject the deal. I think you were one of the 29 that voted for the deal. I mean, given the perception here in Brussels is that the UK could become a rule taker in a whole range of policy areas, from competition policy, state aid, indeed environment policy. What is the case for that deal?
Well, I think the case for the deal is very strong. I mean, clearly, when you've got a negotiation process that's occurred between the United Kingdom and the European Union, that not everything that everybody wants is contained in that deal. But I think the key message is we should not make the perfect the enemy of the good. I think this is a good deal overall. It works well for the United Kingdom and indeed our partners in the European Union, and we should support it. It's good for Scotland. Businesses throughout Scotland have come out in support of the deal. The Scotch Whisky Association, our iconic sector, the Chambers of Commerce have all come out backing the deal, and I think this is good for jobs, it's good for the economy, and it ensures that we have an ongoing relationship with the European Union, which is something that I hold very dearly.
That's a very clear message, Maurice, but if you're not successful next week, if your colleagues in London don't win, do you have a plan B?
Well, I think that the key aspect will be when the final deal is put before those members of Parliament, what their decision is. Now, that could be next week, it could be beyond, it could result in a meaningful vote, then a very meaningful vote, and I think at that point I would encourage all colleagues to back an ongoing relationship with the European Union rather than leaving to a no deal, which means uncertainty and risk. And that is something that we've had in Scotland with the nationalist movement, and that's something that is not good for business, it's not good for jobs, it's not good for tackling poverty and health inequality.
And turning directly to the environmental portfolio that you're responsible for, I know again there's a concern in Scotland, the UK as a whole, but also the EU about transport. Transport's probably the largest single source of CO2 emissions now, and yet emissions from that sector are rising, not falling. The view from the Scottish Conservatives on how we can address the transport challenge?
Yeah, I mean, transport is a major sector that we need to tackle. One of those aspects is behaviour change. Now, when I am in Amsterdam and to a lesser extent Brussels, you see people on bikes, travelling to work. That's something that in the UK we need to do a lot better at. Indeed, as well, one major policy initiative that I've proposed in Scotland is urban consolidation hubs, which sounds very vernacular, but in essence it's just a way in which you can coagulate all your deliveries on the outskirts of a city and then allow them, ideally through electric vehicles, to be delivered to the major ports within that. You know, it's an idea that is taken from Amsterdam throughout with my work previously in Europe, and there's some great examples, but more needs to be done, and that is going to mean change, and people are going to need to understand that the way in which they work, operate, is going to have to be modified, but ultimately the end goal is to ensure that we do tackle climate change and do tackle global warming.
Brings me nice onto the next question. As a former town planner, intrigued, obviously part of your job title is land reform. What land reform would you like to see in Scotland?
Well, we've just actually last week come out with a green cities plan. So this would to help to encourage and ensure that all our towns and urban areas had more trees, more shrubbery, and also put in far more allotments around our urban areas, so that people have a link between the kind of urban environment, but also how things grow and how they work within that. We'd also like to see schools partner up with farms, so that young children, particularly those in impoverished communities, begin to understand how things are grown, how things are produced, and through that mechanism I think it'll be better for everyone all round.
And then finally, Maurice, if I may, one of the questions we always get asked here in Brussels, independent Scottish referendum, you know, any chance that that's going to come back, that Scotland, the issue there is not settled? Again, your view on the independence question, is this something that's just not going to go away?
Well,
and you've had a referendum, you had a binding referendum.
Yeah, I mean, so clearly there was a decisive referendum in 2014, where the people of Scotland backed staying in the United Kingdom. The SNP at that time said this was a once in a generation opportunity, and that lasted literally about 6 months before they were campaigning for another one. That's not going to go away, but I think one thing that has displayed to us over the past few months and years in Scotland is that the people of Scotland are fed up with hearing about referendums. They want the SNP in the Scottish Parliament and my colleagues there to begin delivering on health, on education, on tackling poverty, and that's what I'll encourage the SNP to do, rather than focus on constitutional matters and pursuing another second independence referendum.
Well, that's pretty clear. Many thanks, Maurice, for coming today, and thanks for your time.
A lot.
Thank you.